What would you do if the line between science and savagery disappeared? Humanity has always pushed boundaries, reaching depths of experimentation few can imagine. From testing minds to breaking bodies, these were the forbidden lines crossed in the name of progress. Prepare yourself for a journey into history's most horrifying scientific failures. To understand some of humanity's darkest capacities, we have to cast our minds back to antiquity, into a time when brutality was often institutionalized as science. Early civilizations routinely performed horrific testing on those deemed expendable, captured enemies, or condemned criminals who were reduced purely to biological data points. These brutal experiments weren't about treatment. They were fundamentally about measuring thresholds, pain tolerance, endurance under duress, and the sheer limits of the human body. One chilling example involves groups like the Taunos, often colloquially known as war pigs in some historical texts, whose bodies served up to knowledge about warfare itself. Imagine war captives, perhaps around 300 BCE, subjected not just to torture for information, but to meticulously measured physical stress tests by physicians who viewed suffering through a scientific lens rather than an ethical one. They weren't asking, "How do you feel?" They were logging measurable vital signs while introducing escalating levels of pain, the weight of the shackles, the specific angle of impact, recording it all on clinical slates. These records paint a picture of calculated cruelty, where human dignity was stripped away simply so that ancient minds could better understand how far man could be pushed before breaking. Next, we turn our focus to the depths of World War II, a conflict that dragged humanity into some of its darkest scientific corners. Here, captive populations, often prisoners or marginalized groups, were viewed not as people, but as mere biological resources. The desperate and advancing needs of wartime research fueled experiments focused on extracting and adapting various body fluids. Researchers were specifically interested in blood plasma, studying it for everything from antivenom to advanced treatments, treating the human body like a sophisticated supply depot. These procedures were brutal, invasive, and often involved repeated collections without consent, scarring lives, or even leading to death. The very existence of these programs reveals a chilling calculation that individual suffering could be justified by the promise of scientific advancement. It was a horrifying blending of medical knowledge with inhumane cruelty, forever staining the history of human rights. The fear of germ warfare has haunted humanity for millennia, a nightmare scenario that often feels closer to speculative fiction than mere history. Yet, throughout the 20th century, anxieties fueled by geopolitical tensions spurred both theoretical studies and deeply unsettling attempts at weaponizing pathogens. The Cold War era saw this dread peak, shifting biological research from purely medical advancements to national security concerns. Scientists on both sides frantically researched agents ranging from anthrax bacteria back into ancient plagues to engineered variants of influenza. In chilling examples, the United States began stockpiling vaccines containing dangerous pathogens, treating them not as cures, but as devastating potential weapons. This wasn't always theory. Facilities were established specifically for biosurveillance and development. It raises a profound ethical quandary. Where do we draw the line between saving lives and engineering death? The existence of protocols and materials designed to unleash unseen, invisible killers remains one of the darkest chapters in human scientific history. During the terrifying global paranoia of the Cold War, fear of Soviet influence fueled some of humanity's darkest scientific endeavors, the quest to break enemy minds remotely. These anti-Soviet psychological operations weren't about espionage in the traditional sense. They were about pure behavioral modification, a chilling study into what it took to shatter a will entirely. Researchers, under classified government auspices, developed brutal techniques, most infamously involving protracted sensory deprivation, where subjects were held isolated for days. They experimented with everything from controlled hypobaric chambers to powerful psychoactive drugs like LSD and barbiturates, subjecting human minds to unimaginable stress. The goal was control, extracting actionable intelligence by systematically dismantling personal identity through controlled trauma. Some heartbreaking accounts describe tests that lasted weeks, leaving participants confused, hallucinating, or permanently damaged. These unethical programs represented a shocking perversion of science, treating the complexity of the human psyche merely as raw material for military theory. It serves as one of the clearest reminders of how fear and political paranoia can strip away fundamental human dignity in the name of national security. It wasn't immediately clear just how dangerous this viral disease was, but as polio gripped America in the 1940s and 50s, a desperate race to immunization began. The potential cure sparked enormous optimism, yet the path out of crisis was littered with heartbreaking failures. Early vaccine trials often utilized vulnerable populations, children especially, who had no choice but to participate in medical progress. One particularly chilling incident involves the manufacturing flaws from around 1955, specifically when batches of Salk's inactivated polio vaccine entered circulation before proper quality control was established. The subsequent outbreaks revealed that some doses contained residual live virus or were simply improperly processed. This flaw, known as the Cutter incident, resulted in dozens of cases of severe polio, iron lung treatments, and permanent paralysis among otherwise healthy children. These moments serve as somber reminders that even the march towards scientific breakthroughs requires immense ethical rigor, transforming hope into a sobering lesson about public safety testing. Long before electrodes and chemical agents became facets of interrogation, humans found deeply effective ways to dismantle the will through isolation and manipulation. Early techniques often exploited basic needs, sensory deprivation being one of the most unsettling examples, rendering time meaningless and the mind captive to its own echo. Consider Ward's witch trials methodology, not merely physical torment, but the relentless psychological pressure designed to force a confession of witchcraft where none existed. Even in modern settings, these principles persist. Techniques like forced questioning, coupled with sleep exhaustion or controlled information streams, are designed less to extract data and more to induce profound cognitive stress. The brilliance and horror of this study is that it reveals something universal about identity itself, that our sense of selfhood can be undone by fear, uncertainty, and a carefully managed lack of reality. Today's psychological understanding attempts to map the borders between perceived control and actual surrender, giving us painfully clear insights into human resilience. These historical records serve as vital case studies, reminding us how the careful orchestration of psychological despair remains one of humanity's most powerful tools for breaking spirit. Decades of scientific progress were built upon a deeply disturbing foundation: the torture of non-human primates. These intelligent animals, our evolutionary cousins, were subjected to invasive tests, often without anesthetic or genuine veterinary care, all in the name of human health. Imagine the relentless research into everything from polio vaccines to HIV treatments, conducted on beings that felt genuine fear and pain. The details emerging from facilities across the mid-20th century are horrific: forced infections, agonizing surgeries, and constant deprivation. This brutality wasn't just a scientific practice, it was an ethical abyss. While advancements promised cures for humans, those advances were stained by suffering endured in cages and laboratory settings. It is this legacy of pain that ultimately fueled the modern movement toward robust institutional review boards, forever forcing medicine to confront its own moral limits. The cries, physical and silenced, of those primates etched a permanent scar onto the history of bioethics, ensuring that no corner of medical research could ever again operate in absolute ethical darkness. So where does this leave us? Standing at the threshold of unimaginable technological power, curing genetic diseases almost on whim, editing life itself with tools like CRISPR, we are faced with a profound ethical mirror. The history we've just traversed warns us that sheer capability has no inherent moral compass. Today, modern bioethics attempts to build those safeguards, frameworks centered around principles like autonomy, beneficence, and justice, ensuring the patient's right to self-determination and preventing unwarranted harm. But these principles are not static. They must evolve as fast as our science does. The greatest danger isn't any single experiment, but rather a human collective ambition that outpaces its conscience. As we look toward therapies promising eternal life or radical enhancement, the question becomes heartbreakingly simple. At what point? The moment of which should be decided by philosophers, not just engineers. Does improvement cease and eugenics begin? The weight is on us now, requiring us to answer those difficult questions before the tools become irreversible. These stories are chilling, but they are a stark warning. History shows us that pure ambition is a dangerous guide, especially when human life is the variable. The line between healing and harm can be paper-thin, demanding constant vigilance. What does progress cost you? That remains the most critical question of all.